And welcome everybody to chapter 13. We have basically this week and then next week and then your final exam. So we're really getting close down to the end of the semester. Hope everybody had a great Thanksgiving week. Don't forget right off the bat that you have your Paducah Chiefs Baseball Club sales calls that are due by this weekend. Keep in mind as well that most businesses are going to be closed outside of normal business hours. That's probably 8 to 5. Depending on your business, you need to look to make sure that you're understanding when they're going to be open. But typically think 8 to 5, Monday through Friday, Central Standard Time is probably pretty typical. But again, you'll need to look to make sure that your businesses are open so that you have a chance to call them. Hopefully, most of you have been pretty proactive and have gone ahead and called some of your businesses already. But note that if you do not get a hold of these businesses, that will be on you. It's not necessarily going to be something that you can get back from. So you will lose a lot of points if you don't manage to get in touch with somebody from these businesses. So we'll jump right into it. This chapter, we're going to be talking about Salesforce management. So we've pretty much gone through the entire sales process. So now we're going to talk about what it's like to be a manager of a sales force or salespeople. So just jump right into it. Here's some of the key terms that are there. I'm not going to go in through each of these in detail. We'll talk about a couple of these throughout the lecture. And then others, make sure that you're looking up in your book and understanding each of these terms. Again, as we get close to the final, just remember that you're going to have a lot of these terms will show up through your final. You're not going to necessarily have time to look those up. So make sure that you're understanding these. They'll help throughout the process. So what is Salesforce management? So management essentially is the coordination and integration of resources to effectively and efficiently meet goals or objectives of an organization. Note that this has nothing to do with being a good player on the field of play. It has everything to do with what goes on behind the scenes. As Team USA, we always called it the team behind the team. So the people that are hopefully doing everything possible to make it easier for the operations side or the team to be able to focus on what they do best, which is on the field of play. Sales managers must be effective in four different areas. So planning, organizing, leading, and evaluating. And we're going to talk about each of these a little further into the lecture. But notice that effective planning, organizing, leading, and evaluating, those are all essential for any sort of manager, but especially in Salesforce management. Turnover in sales is very high. We've talked about this. People will get a good start. A lot of times in sport, they can get a start in sales, but they're not there very long. They'll typically branch into other categories. For those select few that really enjoy sales and find that they're good at it, they'll move up into different positions. And we'll talk about how organizations build talent now versus what they used to do in the past and what that looks like, some of the trends that are there. But turnover is very, very high. So from a management standpoint, you have to have a deep bench, meaning that you have to know who's going to take that person's place. You have to have avenues of where you can find replacement positions. You also have to have, if you're really good, you have specific people in mind, should one of your salespeople leave, so that you maybe already had that conversation, or maybe you have somebody in mind of who that person could be. We talk about that a lot with the Huddle Up group, as well as Go Empire group, two of my companies, because we are such lean organizations. We really have to be effective. We have to be efficient, but we have to have a deep bench too, meaning that when somebody inevitably leaves your organization, that you know who that person is. And keep in mind too, as one of my bosses has told me in the past, if I didn't have companies that were poaching or trying to get my people, then I'm hiring the wrong people, right? So turnover is going to happen, especially in positions like this. So don't view it as a bad thing. Just view it as part of the process, and make sure you're doing your due diligence to understand, again, who's on your bench, and have a deep bench so that you have options. And then most importantly, people that can drive culture as well. So managers will have a deep bench, so they'll have good people that they work with, that they have on deck. And then they can also drive culture. And culture is most important for a lot of people because we do spend so much time working these days. It's really important to have a culture that people want to spend that time with. I've turned down plenty of positions in the past because I was comfortable with the culture that I had with current companies and with companies at that time, with teams, people that I was working with, people that I was working for, people that I was overseeing. So that culture can sometimes make up for maybe money deficiencies. It can make up for job titles, things of that nature, just having a good culture. So a few theories of management, three in particular. One is the scientific management theory. So this essentially looks at the efficiency of the work. So it talks about, how people can be efficient. It talks about, different metrics that go into it as well. But think about scientific method. Scientific management is very similar to that in the sense of, we're thinking through this very holistically. We're thinking through this in a way where businesses can follow principles of efficiency, drive from different experiences and methods of work and production. So this is all we're looking at here is really the efficiency of the work. The second is the behavioral management theory. This really looks at human dimension of the workplace. So it talks about motivation, it talks about relationships, really aims to look at the behaviors of people. And it's a theory examining exactly workplace productivity and how that's impacted by employee motivation and also the relationships among coworkers and managers. And that's what we were just talking about, finding a culture where you can have good relationships, you feel valued as a person, and you feel like you get compensated adequately with the level of work that you put in. So that goes into behavioral management. And then lastly is the total quality management. So total quality management, which is also kind of known as the modern theory today, suggests that employees must be personally committed to maintaining high work standards and improving product or service quality with a focus on customer satisfaction. So this is essentially to say that, employees, people internally are focused on doing the very best that they can, continuing to raise the bar, so to speak, and then inevitably providing the people that they work with a great expectation and also a great level of service or product that's there too. So it kind of looks at both the internal perspectives as well as the relationships with your customers, your clients, and hopefully creating a very good environment for both internal and external customers and clients. So first, we're going to look at recruiting. We talked about this as a manager, you have to be able to recruit. So we talked about the bench. So who is on your bench, right? So who's on your bench? Who could you put in place? Who's on your team? Who's on your active roster? You have to think of things such as how big or small your team should be. And when you think about this, you have to talk about opportunity costs for hiring a next person. So do you have a bunch of younger entry-level people that are out there making cold calls for you and selling for you? Do you have some established veterans who are doing that instead? As you can imagine, if you're getting somebody with experience and with quite a long resume, you're probably going to have to pay these people much more. So, can you make do with managing younger people and training younger people to get to the level where they're more effective and more efficient, because effectiveness and efficiency also comes down to, again, that opportunity cost. So if I'm paying someone $50,000, I'm going to demand that they have this level of production. If I'm paying somebody $30,000, maybe the level of production doesn't necessarily have to be as high because, when you view your salary, and I want you to think about this when you get at your first job, or if you have a job right now, can you validate the money that the employee pays you in your productivity? And in sales is very much black and white for the most part, right? If you are costing the company this much per month, you should be making up more than that in sales and revenue per month. And the same thing annually. Some companies will say that it needs to be 2 times the cost to the employee. Sometimes people will say 3 times. So really, you want to make sure that your costs are as minimal as possible for the revenue that's being brought in the door. So that's the opportunity cost. So if I bring on X number of people how much are they going to cost me, and how much incremental revenue can these people bring in, as opposed to having one fewer person. How much money am I bringing in versus the cost that's going out the door? So you have to think about that. And that's the opportunity cost that we talk about. Managers also have to talk about getting people to buy into the culture of the organization, which we've talked about. And then, of course, what Coach Patino, when I worked for Coach Patino, always talks about. He has a really good book about this too, which is called the One Day Contract, which is essentially you renewing yourself each and every day, you signing a 1-day contract with yourself each and every day. And these are the type of people that you want in your positions, on your team, on your bench, are those PhD people. So PhD stands for passionate, hungry, and driven, right? So people that are passionate about what they do, who they are, and what your organization does. They're hungry, to go out and seek what's out there for them to do more. And they're driven to bring it every single day. That's what you're looking for. So from a recruiting standpoint, this is what a manager has to look at. From a hiring standpoint, developing talent versus hiring talent, you can imagine it's much, much more cost effective to develop talent versus hiring talent. So, somebody who has job experience, somebody who is making 6 figures, bringing them into a higher level position into a company. They're obviously coming in with a lot of experience, but they're having to learn your culture. They're having to learn your products or your services, and that takes time. And the higher the level of the position, the longer it typically will take to get that person up to speed. And then on the flip side, you have hiring talent, right? So typically if you're developing talent, if you're developing talent, normally you're hiring people at an entry level or that can start off as interns or part-time employees. You're teaching them the products, the services, the culture, and then you're hopefully elevating them to higher positions where you don't have to teach all the intangibles. You don't have to teach the culture. You don't have to teach anything else, but rather you're developing that from internal as opposed to looking external. So that's something to think about. So and again, that's an opportunity cost as well. There's no right answer. It's just a difference of opinions to maintaining culture. So people who are bought into your organization already versus people who are going to have to learn that coming in. And then, of course, you have different hiring techniques that you'll see. So one of those hiring techniques, and you may have had to do this before, are taking psychometric tests. So these are standardized tests utilized to evaluate a person's mental abilities or personality. Some of you may have taken personality tests when applying for jobs. This is essentially to say that this person either has the skill set necessary for this position, or they have the personality that would get along well with the team, or perhaps as newer organizations are thinking a little differently, how can we hire somebody that maybe we don't have on the team that could supplement the personalities that we do have on our team and bring a different perspective? So those are becoming more and more popular as you go through. And a couple of weeks ago, you all actually took a psychometric test, which was part of, focusing on, what your skill set is and how you can interact with people that are a little different from you. And then finally, you have assessment centers where, psychometric tests are really focused, they're standardized, they're focused on really mental abilities or personality. Assessment centers are really process where candidates are evaluated for suitability for employment by different simulation exercises. So perhaps you're giving them prompts that showcase that they actually have the ability to think holistically about how they would handle their job each and every day. So next you have the training piece. In terms of training, you're talking about onboarding or orientation, as most people will call it. So onboarding to get people up to speed. So what does that onboarding look like? How long is that? If you're a salesperson, you want to know how long it's going to take you to get into an organization and to get up to speed to start selling, right? Because most people in sales will get paid off of their productivity. So their commission, which we'll talk a little bit about a little later, which is basically their award or reward for bringing in business. So what does that onboarding look like? And this should be everything from your products, your services, the tools that you use, maybe your CRM system, your databases, everything that's there. The more robust the company and the organization, the longer the onboarding is probably going to take. Ride-alongs are, where you're going with somebody who's currently working in the sales process or sales department rather. So you're basically just, shadowing this person as they go through to try to learn lingo, to try to learn exactly what a salesperson should be learning through an organization, what the company looks for, et cetera. And then recorded training calls, which is kind of the other way, as opposed to a ride along where you're really just kind of shadowing and being quiet and learning. On recorded training calls, essentially you are going through the exercise yourself. You're making the sales calls yourself or the visits yourself. And then those are being listened by your superiors, your managers, which you can then get feedback based off of how those things go. And then, of course, CRM systems, which we've talked about in depth through this semester, customer relationship management systems, which is the process of how you're recording your activity, you're showing your leads, you're showing your sales, things of that nature. Motivation. Motivation is very, very important. As we know, we have to be motivated to do anything that we do. If we get up in the morning, we have to be motivated by some force. If we go to school, we have to be motivated by some force. If we play on the basketball team, if we play on the hockey team, there's some sort of motivation that is there that is prompting us to do that. Whether our motivation is money, whether it's a scholarship, whether it's love of the game, whether it's getting good grades, whether it's our family or our friends, or just intrinsic motivation by ourselves. We all have motivation to do the things that we do or act like we act. All right. So there are two different theories that are in the book that you can read about a little more in detail. But the first is Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which is essentially saying that human behavior is based off of 5 different levels or needs that must be satisfied sequentially, meaning in order. Then you have the motivation hygiene theory, which essentially suggests that certain factors in the workplace cause employee satisfaction and certain cause employee dissatisfaction. So things that provide us satisfaction and some that provide us dissatisfaction. And then motivation can come in a number of different ways, as we just talked about, the reason that you're in school, the reason that you play a sport, the reason that you're taking this class, all of those things, there's a motivation behind it. Sales commission is a big motivation for salespeople. A commission essentially means, if I sell something for $10, I'm getting a percentage of that $10 from the organization that I work for as a commission, basically as a reward for putting in the work that I did to bring that money into the door. So commission is very popular, and it depends, totally depends on the type of work that you're doing or the type of organization that you're doing, or the scale of the sale that you're making. For $1 million gadget, you're probably getting more commission off of that than you would off of a $10, hat or something like that. And then there are other benefits that are there that are motivation incentives, such as bonuses, year-end bonuses for hitting certain numbers. Some people have sales trips. If you're the top salesperson in the organization, you get a trip. And then value in kind. So perhaps, if you hit certain levels, you can purchase something off of a customer website or something like that. And then there's evaluation. Evaluation is something that we're all very familiar with. Obviously, you're getting evaluated for this course. You'll have a grade and a number that's associated with that grade. We are graded and evaluated in a number of different ways in our lives, whether we want to or not. Especially as we talk about sport, there's an evaluation of who wins the game, who scores the most goals, who scores the most points, who is ahead after 4 quarters, who is ahead after 3 periods, things of that nature. So evaluation in sales, there are a number of different metrics we talked about this semester. So just to retouch these, a first touch call, you can be measured based off the number of people that you talk to, right? So first touch, meaning the very first time that you talk to somebody, how many new people are you bringing into the sales funnel? At the Huddle Up group, my sales team, we have the 4 touch rule, which essentially means that throughout the year, you are touching every customer at least 4 times. And usually that's broken down into 1 a quarter, which is 1 every 3 months. but it's just a good metric. And we measure this based off of CRM to showcase that, actually we are touching these people, because the last thing we want is for a person who hasn't been touched in a year to then have to get a renewal notification from us, or to get hit up on a call when I haven't talked to them in a year, talking about how we want to hire, how we want their business again for the next year when we've done nothing for them. Next would be appointment set. So after those, calls, how many appointments are you actually setting for a demo, for, whatever it may be, to show different features, things of that nature. Closing ratio basically means the number of appointments that you have and a number of sales that you get. So, if you have 100 appointments that you do, are you closing in on half of those? Are you closing in on a third of those? Are you closing in on a tenth of those? Whatever the metrics may be. And then the revenue generated is the number, the money that's coming into the organization because of all your sales efforts. Retention and renewals means that you're retaining business. Again, as we've talked about throughout the semester, it's much easier to retain business than it is to bring in new business. Hopefully your customers are having a good enough experience that they continue to renew each and every year. And then finally, discipline and termination. So basically, this is an evaluation of unmet metrics that are there, meaning that somebody is not doing the job. And so you need to go in another direction as opposed to just wasting money paying this person. So, this is something that in sales particular is very black and white most of the time. It's here's your metric, here's the number of meetings you need to schedule, here's the number of outreaches you need to have or touch points. And if you don't do these things, then you'll be terminated. And that is everything that we have for this chapter. Make sure that you're reading through in your book. Again, final reminder that you have your Paducah Chiefs Baseball Club sales calls that are due by the end of this week, and your write-ups as well. So feel free to reach out to me for any questions, comments, concerns that you have. 3 weeks left. Finish the semester strong. There's going to be a lot going on here the last couple of weeks with the Paducah Chiefs project, as well as the final exam. You have a ton of points that are still out there. So make sure that you finish the semester strong. And as always, if you need anything at all, don't hesitate to reach out. Thanks so much.